Hello, I'm Aaron Benjamin, and welcome to Legally Speaking. On our show, we will discuss the law and its impact on people in our community. Whether it's for your family, your safety, your business, or your future, we understand that the law makes an immediate and direct impact every day on everyone. We've had a lot of fun bringing you to the show, and we hope you find it as educational as it is enlightening. On this month's episode of Legally Speaking, we will be talking about wills, trusts, and everything in between with Micah Bonaviri, who's not only a partner in our trust and estates practice here at Stein, Sperling, but is also a good personal friend and helped me with my will. Micah and I had a great time chatting about a number of topics, including why everyone, yes, everyone needs a will and what should go into a will. What is a trust? And isn't that just something for the 1% of the 1% of the 1%? Or maybe not. And also we share some stories about family members who inspired us along the way. Hope you enjoy. One kid, then two kids, then three kids. And if there's a fourth kid, it's not going to be mine. So I don't know.
Are you sure the first three are?
Well, from what I've been told and what they tell me.
That's not always the case, though.
It's
23 and me.
That was last week's episode. I'm Aaron Benjamin. Welcome back. I'm here with Micah Bonaviri, a partner in our estates group. So as you may have heard, we're talking about wills. And let's start with that. And the question I get when I'm talking to people in the community or I'm talking to clients and wills come up, it's always, I got to do my will. And then the next thing I hear is, I could put it off. So tell me, Micah, why should I get one?
Well, it's a good question. I think it really applies differently to everyone. If you're a younger family, maybe you're focusing more on your children, and maybe that's the reason for getting a will. If you are older and you are considering retirement, maybe that's the reason to get a will, is that you want to coordinate it with your beneficiary designation. So your retirement monies, your life insurance proceeds. Your kids are older, maybe we need to make certain provisions in there for asset protection. So it really depends on your sort of stage in life. But I think, I could almost come up with a reason why everyone needs a will. It really just depends on how complicated you want it to be.
I know it in my head that there's a step in between that you're going to be able to make things smoother and easier for your family when you're not here with a will, but I don't have the language to describe that. Can you explain it to me? Yeah,
the two biggest things, right, are probably control and to reduce, interfamily, challenges and arguments, right? So when we say control, we're talking about you get the opportunity to name who's going to make decisions for you, who's going to step into your shoes and do things for you or on behalf of your estate. You're making that call. You're not letting the courts or your family or friends make that decision. It also gives you control as to what happens to your assets, right? Some people don't want everything going to their kids when they're 18 or going to a certain, a close relative by default, right? So it's definitely control, and then obviously reducing arguments. I can't tell you the number of stories we have with people coming in here. They're fighting over anything that you can think of. Photos, jewelry, artwork, even junk in the house. People fight over everything when people pass away. And so it allows you to say, this is what's going to happen. This is what I want. This is who's in charge.
Why can't I just do it on my own? I'm a relatively smart guy, in the grand scheme of things, maybe not in this room, but generally I'm a relatively smart guy. And I know enough about where things are going to go. I could write it down. Why can't I just do it on my own?
Well, I've seen you write before, and so I don't think you should write one on your own. But no, to your bigger question, I think that there's a lot that goes into it that people don't often realize, right? If it was easy as just saying, when I die, I want my Picasso to go to so-and-so, everyone would do it on their own, and there would be no fights, and basically I would not have a job, right? And so I think that there is a big difference, just because you don't know all of the things, all the contingencies to think of. How is any tax going to get paid? What are some of the considerations? We talk about people wanting to name a guardian. Well, what happens if you name two people as guardian and one of them can't do it? Is the other person in charge? Does it go to someone else? Things like that. What are some of the considerations with naming joint agents? Lots of people come in and they'll say, I'm married. I want to name my spouse to make medical decisions for me if I can't. And then if my spouse also can't, then I want my two kids to make them. Well, that sounds great right now, but what if they don't agree? What if there's a decision that needs to be made and one says, I want surgery, and the other one says, I don't want mom to have surgery, or whatever it is. Lots of things like that we're able to help people think about and really plan for, and that's really why we call it estate planning,
Right.
Not will drafting.
So now you touched on some of the other instruments that go into an estate plan. Or we've heard the term power of attorney. In Maryland, there's a medical directive. What are those, and how does that fit into an estate plan?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because it often goes overlooked. Most people call up or they email and they say, I hear that you're an estate planning attorney and I really need a will. And that could be true. But also I think that the bigger picture is really what we call estate planning, and really what goes into that is 5 or 6 documents, maybe more, maybe fewer. But a will is just one of them, right? So we have, I like to call it planning during lifetime, like lifetime planning, and then planning after you pass away. And so the lifetime planning consists of some of those documents you mentioned: the financial power of attorney, advanced medical directive, a HIPAA waiver, something we've talked about before with young kids, a designation of standby guardian. All of these documents together, if you have them in place before you become incapacitated, then no one needs to go to court to get the authority, to obtain the authority to make decisions for you. So, if you happen to go into the hospital because you're in a car accident, these documents will allow you get the opportunity to name who's going to pay your bills, who's going to sign your tax returns, who's going to talk to doctors, make medical decisions. Without them, and I know that this sounds crazy, but without them, technically, no one has authority to do that for you, and they have to go to court and get appointed as your guardian, an adult guardianship, to make those decisions for you. And that generally costs, let's just say law firms make more money going through the guardianship process than they do with estate planning.
So you're saying if everybody knows somebody that's been affected in this way, whether it was COVID or some other kind of pandemic or national emergency, you're not with your kids or not with all your kids, and there's a medical issue that comes up, you don't just go into the doctor. Let's say, I had an issue and we were out of the country and my youngest daughter got stung in the eye by a bee. Then my mom was kind enough to...
Thankfully, you weren't there. So.
I would handle it with grace, like I normally do. But because of you talking me into doing a standby guardianship before we left, my mom was able to take our daughter to the doctor. And I didn't even realize that we needed that. I figured, like you said, it's just commonplace. Yeah, we have the same last name. It's, my granddaughter, can you please prescribe this medication? And the answer, I guess, sounds like it would have been no if it wasn't for the standby guardianship.
So it does depend on the doctor and the hospital or the practice. But yes, if you go away, we actually had two cases during the pandemic. One, we had a couple that a client that they went away before the pandemic, and when the pandemic hit, they actually couldn't get back to the United States. They couldn't get a flight for a couple of weeks. And then we had another couple during the pandemic that went into the hospital because they were both sick at the same time, and they were unable to care for their kids for 2 or 3 weeks. And so, yes, most of the time, would it be okay? Mom steps in, grandma steps in, or a neighbor or something. Yeah. Could they take them to the pediatrician or the doctor and have them look at it. Could it go okay? Sure, it's always possible, right? Occasionally doctors are lenient too, but under the law, they're not supposed to. And so technically, whether it's your mom or someone else, needs to have authority, written authority, to make decisions to, what if with her eye, what if they needed like minor surgery? She needs the ability to be able, the authority to be able to direct that, right? Make that decision. And so that's what this document does. It gives you temporary authority to be guardian. And in Maryland, it's allowed for 180 days. Virginia and DC are slightly different in terms of their limits. But it's really great because it says, you know what, I'm going away. I don't need to worry about this. No one's going to have to go to court if something happens.
Right.
You can take them to the doctor, the dentist. You can sign school permission slips. You basically have temporary parental rights. And it keeps, I know that this sounds crazy, foster care, social services out of the picture.
Now, someone like me who is ahead of the game and has everything all set up because I know Micah here. Is that now chiseled in stone? Can I change it at any point? What do I have to do? Is it a process to change it if I need to?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that lots of people have. There are aspects of estate planning that are irrevocable. So in other words, can't be changed. However, we do have some sort of tools in our toolbox where we're able to change certain things. Certainly not everything once it's irrevocable, but we can change some things. It just goes to the point of it can cost money. It can be expensive to make those changes. But for the most part, when we're talking about primary estate planning documents, people coming in and setting up their estate plan, the foundational documents, the main ones where we're not talking about gifting or irrevocable trust or anything like that, all of those can be amended and modified. And usually the way I look at it with people and the way I explain it is that, yes, there's an initial cost up front to pay for the plan. But then when you call up, in 2 years and you say, we had another child or, something happened to so-and-so and we're not really close with them anymore. We want to change and name this person in this role. All of those changes can be done pretty quickly and pretty easily. So everything can be changed that we're talking about today. And it's a pretty easy process to do that. We've talked about in the past, times where people might want to make changes, and I've joked before that I always find it interesting whenever there's holidays. You got Thanksgiving, you got the holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, Easter. Whenever families are getting together, at the end of those nights, at the end of those meals, I generally get several emails from clients that are saying, "Hey, Micah, remember when we did my will and we named my brother as guardian? Yeah, we just had Thanksgiving dinner and we'd like to replace him with someone else." So those are always interesting conversations too. So yes, the answer is you can change them.
The important stuff, like
Right.
Who's in and who's out.
Yes, yes.
All right, before we transition into, get my upper crust, into trusts, I want to give you a pop quiz.
All right.
What's the difference between if I have this cup, this beautiful Stein Sperling cup?
It's a good looking cup.
I know, it's a great cup. It's filled with wonderful water. What's the difference if I bequeath it to you in a will or if I just gift it to you? Is there a difference? What's the difference between something bequeathed and a gift?
Yeah. So bequeath always occurs on death. It's basically a gift on death, right? Whereas a gift, at least for our purposes for estate planning, it's a gift during lifetime. So one of them is where you're actually giving up control and getting it out of your estate while you're alive before you pass away. Whereas when you bequeath something, you're doing that at death. So you're owning it. You can continue to use it. You can continue to do whatever you want with it until you die. And that's when, assuming you still own it, that's when it would go to the person. There are also different tax.
I was going to say, what are those implications generally?
So, right now, fortunately, the tax laws are very favorable, whether it be the estate tax, the gift tax. I guess the only one that's not is the income tax. But those two, from the planning point of view, those two are very favorable right now. So not many people are affected by the estate taxes or the gift taxes right now. Mm-hmm. As most people know, you can give this year, starting 2023, $17,000 a year to anyone you want in the whole world without telling anyone. You don't need to report it. But if you give more than that, if you give someone 18,000 or 100,000, if I could only be so lucky, then you do need to report it. The good thing is you don't pay any gift taxes on it because we have an exemption of over $12 million that you can give away during your life before you have to pay taxes on it. So imagine how many people can really give away $12 million while they're alive. Those are the ones that may be affected by gift taxes. But otherwise, you can gift up to that and not even have to pay any taxes on it.
Okay, so the one thing we're dancing around here, and we're dancing around it because it kind of intimidates me a little bit, and that's the idea of a trust. I am not someone who came up in a family with trusts, and I'm not as familiar with them. But the more you and I talk about what a trust can do for you and why people will set up a trust, the more I think maybe I should have looked into this a little bit earlier.
So yeah, I mean, I think that it's also in the world, it's not fully understood by everyone. So you're not alone in that. Do trusts have a purpose? Is there a benefit to them? Yes, absolutely. Are they for everyone? No. And I think that's where people may get lost a little bit, is they listen to other people or they read articles and they say, they come in here and they go, Micah, got to have a trust. I just know it. Now, can you tell me what a trust does? But you just said you need one, right? So
this is our conversation,
right? Yeah. And so really, I always look at it with people, and first of all, it depends on the type of trust you're talking about. Are you talking about, if you ever hear the word irrevocable trust, okay, that's talking about most likely gifting. So a situation where I might set up a trust for the benefit of my son, put money into it each year, gift money. I no longer have control of that money. The trustee does, and they can use that money for whatever the trust says for the benefit of my son. That's an irrevocable trust. The main one that people are really talking about from the initial estate planning perspective is a revocable trust with an R, meaning you can always change it. And that is more of an administrative tool, okay? And I always joke that when you set up a revocable trust, you're not really the one that benefits from it. Your family members are. They're the ones that are, assuming you set it up correctly, you sign it properly, you're going to make their lives easier when you pass away administratively. Less filing, less paperwork, less cost, all of that. But having said that, it's not crucial that everyone has a revocable trust. And I think that's where it really becomes important, because revocable trusts do cost more money. They cost extra money to set up. They just take us more time. And there is homework, right? So after you sign your trust, there is some legwork that you have to do from a retitling perspective. Now, it's not hard, it's not challenging, but it takes time. Mm-hmm. And so I always joke with clients and I say, we're only going to set this trust up if you promise to commit to retitling assets at the end. Mm-hmm. If you don't, I've had plenty that say, Micah, this trust sounds great, but I'm too busy. I'm too lazy. Right. I'm too whatever. I'm never going to do that final retitling, get the bank account in there, get the house in there, whatever it is. Then I say, then don't spend the extra money, right? Lots of people view it as, the main reason being I want to avoid the probate process when someone dies. And that's what a revocable trust does. It really simplifies that process of wrapping up an estate when someone passes away. And so lots of people say, well, you know what? Everything is jointly titled with my spouse. Everything has a beneficiary on it, my retirement, my life insurance. So that's already going to go to people outside of probate. Joint assets go automatically to the survivor. Do I really need a trust? And in some cases, the answer might be no, it's not crucial because you're already avoiding probate. However, there would be significant probate on the second spouse's death. So part of the conversation that we have is it's not just, hey, you come in, do you need a trust or not, right? We look at each asset, we discuss which assets would go into the trust, right? So even if we considered one, what are the assets we would put in there? That would it be beneficial or not? And then also think about, okay, on the second death, so one of you passes away, you rely on wills first. One passes, that person, the surviving spouse, do they need to set up a trust? If so, and if you think you might do that, then maybe it makes sense to set up the trust now while you both have capacity even though the hope is that the benefits that you receive from it may not kick in for 20 or 30 years.
I walk into your office. I've set up an appointment to meet Micah Bonaviri. Well, I'm smarter than I look. Walk in, and I know I need something for my estate. I haven't really done much. I planned my estate before I had kids, but things change. I got 3 kids now. I'm married. What are some of the first questions that you're going to ask me to kind of determine what are all these instruments that we talked about? What are the ones that are going to work for me? What are you going to get out of me to figure out what's best for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a good question. Between that and what's all of this going to cost, those are probably the 2 biggest questions. For you, it'll cost $20 million.
Well, that's natural.
So no, it's a really good question. And really, as a planner, what we're looking at first is we want to understand your circumstances. So, you're married, you live in Maryland, you have 3 kids. We want all that background information. We want to know, are all of your kids, are there any special considerations that we need to think about with each of your kids?
Yeah.
Whether it's financially, whether it's a disability, whatever it may be. We'd like to know if you have life insurance, if you have a retirement account, if you own any property outside of Maryland, if you may be inheriting anything in the future. We'd like to plan for that. So we sort of get a big picture of you and your family, and then where do people in your family live, right? If you're thinking of naming other family members, right? So, think about it like, for my financial power of attorney, if I become incapacitated, I've named my wife first so she can pay all our bills, access our bank account, sign our tax return for me and her. But if she can't do it as well, who do I have next? Well, is it a sibling? Is it a parent? Is it a neighbor? Is it a good friend? Who is it? Where do they live, right? For purposes of financial matters, maybe they can live anywhere, right? Lots of it can be done on the phone or online. But if they're making medical decisions for me, can they get to Maryland? How long can they stay in Maryland? The doctors may want to sit down and have a conversation with them. What if I've named someone that lives in California and has 2 little kids and probably couldn't get on a flight and come here that quickly? Same thing with guardian, right? That's always a big conversation. When kids are young, maybe you don't mind if they move in with family that's in another country or another state. But as they get older, right, you're not going to want to remove your kids who are in 9th and 10th grade if you were to pass away or if you were to become incapacitated, and have them move with family members to Colorado, where I know you like. Maybe you do, but think about the ages of children too when we're making these decisions. So I think, getting a sense as to these things about you, about your family, about your wishes. We have people that come in and when it comes to guardians, they say, well, I want to add in a few thoughts. I want to say, you know what? While you're raising them, these are some things that we would like you to do. Mm-hmm. Spend time with other family each summer. Keep a relationship with them. Be raised with a certain religion. Go to certain camps. Whatever it may be, certain schools. All of this can be sort of accounted for in your documents, and it really just makes everyone's lives easier. Again, hopefully we don't need them, but should we?
Right, which is the whole point.
Yeah, we're just planning for the worst.
So this has been a fantastic conversation, and you and I have had these conversations a bunch, and I think, we know each other pretty well, and I think it'd be really nice to kind of share with the audience a little bit about what drives us, what family members kind of inspired us a little bit, and we're friends, and you know this story, but my grandfather was a really big influence on my life, and one of the few things he passed away, unfortunately, 2 weeks after my wife and I got married, so 15 years ago. And one of the few things that he specifically bequeathed to...
not a gift.
Not a gift, it was bequeathed, because he wore it almost every day of his life, was a ring with his initials on it, made out of a piece of gold that my grandmother had found after surviving the concentration camps, and fashioned into a ring to give to him when they got engaged, and kept it his entire life, and he gave it to me. And we have the same initials, AB. And it's something that the reason why you know this, because I'm going to give it to my son, and the same idea. And I think, the tangible heirloom, that just having that piece of history that walks through from generation to generation is so important to my family. And it's a little thing in the scheme of things, but in terms of a tangible, it's not, the life lessons I learned from my grandfather, but it's a touchstone to it, and something I could point to that my son will be able to point to. And I know you experienced the same thing with your grandfather.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, that's a great story, and if he hadn't planned properly, you may not have ever gotten that. Who knows? Maybe it got sold, not even in the family anymore. Maybe it went to someone else. So obviously, proper planning. It's a great story. I think it's great that you're going to share it, with your son. Keep it in the family, right? And so the proper planning allowed you to do that. I have a pretty interesting story with my grandparents and their tangible property as well. The tangible items, the jewelry, the photos, the artwork, the furniture, all of that, it's becoming more and more of a big conversation. And people don't always know, how do we equalize it? How do we distribute it out? Are the kids going to fight about it? Are they just going to sell everything and not care about it all? And I always say, it's really important when thinking about all of this. But one of the things, with the exception of certain items, lots of us, most people think that our tangible property, our items, our personal property is worth much more than it really is, or that people really want it much more than they do. And so a sort of great reminder for me is that when my grandparents passed away, my grandfather passed away first. Everyone in the family got certain things, but most of it stayed with my grandmother. And when she passed, she had allocated all out. They had these long lists. So it really did work to reduce or eliminate any fighting. But I remember I was sitting in my office, and this was several weeks after my grandmother passed, and I get a phone call, and my family, I'm originally from Boston, and everyone up there used the same movers for a lot of things, and they were terrific. And I got a call from one of the guys one of the movers, and he's like, "Hey, Micah, we've met years, so yep. So we're going to be driving through Maryland, and we have a bunch of items that your grandparents left you that we want to drop off." And I was like, "Well, that's so nice of them, but I got to be honest. I have an idea of what they are, and I don't really want them. So thank you, but you can just go ahead and donate them." And he said, "That's very funny. Your grandmother said that you would say that. She prepaid for us to bring this all down, and we are going to be coming down in a few months. When can we meet you? Does this Saturday work?" And I'm like, "All right, fine, this Saturday works." That Saturday comes, these movers show up. They show up with all this furniture that I don't want or don't need, a gold bookcase with a light in it, a white couch that is no longer white, all of this stuff. And so they spend hours trying to cram it into my basement. Once it's in there, I can't get it out, and I don't want to pay movers to come and move it to donate it. So I had to eventually find a charity that would come over, take it, and move it and give it to someone. So we always need to remember that we do have some things that we think are more worthwhile than others. So people aren't always going to want a lot of your stuff, and we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about this.
That is a life lesson that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I wish I had saved some for my kids. But this is what you're going to get.
Well, Micah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.